Hello everybody, this is Draven. Welcome to my next video. So, we talk a lot about sacred space. We all have a sacred space that has been designed to look a certain way, and it will typically be aesthetically pleasing. But what would we do to build a sacred space on a mass scale, on a community scale? How would we do it? In the occult mathematics toolbox, there is a concept that would help us very much as we began the planning and design work. That tool in that toolbox is called sacred geometry. The concept of sacred geometry has been around for millennia. One of the earliest proponents of it was the famed mathematician Pythagoras of ancient Greece. Pythagoras of Samos was a famous Greek mathematician born on the island of Iona around 570 years before the Common Era. He was famous for several mathematical theories, especially the famous Pythagorean theorem about establishing the area of a right triangle, pi times radius squared, or 3.14. He led a group of like-minded individuals in what was called the Pythagorean School. The Pythagorean School was a philosophical and religious order founded by Pythagoras of Samos. They had several core beliefs. Amongst these core beliefs was the metaphysics of number, that the energies of life and music were mathematic in nature. The second was philosophy as a means of purification. The third was the possibility of the soul's ascent to union with the divine in the divine union, which the divine union is something that has been a very common thread throughout occult groups and occult orders throughout history. And it's not really something that we need to get into in this video. They also believed in the visual appeal of certain structures, such as the tetractylus and the harmony of the spheres, and of course the Pythagorean theorem. Now, Pythagoras and the Pythagorean school had a lot of influence throughout the ancient world, especially in ancient Greece. An early adherent to the Pythagorean school of thought was the famed Greek philosopher Plato. He was a foundation and a keystone of the Western philosophical movement, and in fact, he is a foundational philosopher to it all. Plato was born between 428 and 423 BCE, and he passed away between 348 and 347 BCE. He popularized literary dialogue and dialectics. He founded a philosophical school in Athens. He also helped popularize what are now known as the Platonic Solids. In geometry, a Platonic solid is a complex polyhedron in three-dimensional space. The tetrahedron, octahedron, and cube are all defined as Platonic solids. All three forms, the octahedron, tetrahedron, and cube, appear in nature in crystalline structure. Some viruses may take the form of the icosahedron. In Dungeons and Dragons, Several of the dice are shaped after the Platonic solids. This obviously is the cube, 6 sides equal in size. The regular icosahedron is the shape of the D8 dice. And the dodecahedron is the D12. It's not very often used. And of course, the ever famous D20 is the tetrahedron. This is the one you want to roll high on, or you're not going to hit a thing. So the Platonic solids are found throughout nature in various ways throughout natural formation and structure. And you'll see the shapes repeating throughout our crystals and stones. If you look at bacteria under a microscope, you may see the icosahedron, and the Platonic solids have been adopted in the modern tabletop role-playing game world. The golden ratio, one of the foundational principles of sacred geometry. The ratio is 1 to 1.68. It is a proportional measurement. Later, Michael here to make a correction, since the audio for the segment that I'm now refilming had terrible audio and picture. The western facade of the Cathedral of Notre Dame is a perfect example of sacred geometry and the golden ratio. The western facade has an entryway to it, bordered by 2 towers on the north and south. The entryway is set at a certain height, and the north tower and the south tower are identical to one another in perfect proportion, and the entryway is 1.68 times smaller than either tower on either side. The western entryway of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris is one of the most beautiful structures ever made and is world famous. Another common usage of sacred geometry and the golden ratio is seen in famous artworks throughout history. One such famous example I'm going to let earlier Michael tell you about. The Vitruvian Man is the image of 2 male figures drawn within a circle and a square, displaying human symmetry and, at the time, what was viewed as human proportional perfection. Another concept closely associated to sacred geometry is the Fibonacci sequence. This is an arrangement of numbers described and discovered by Italian mathematician Leonardo Bonacci. Bonacci was an Italian mathematician from Pisa, Italy, famous for the Leaning Tower. He presented the works on the Fibonacci numerical sequence in the 13th century. The Fibonacci sequence can be proven out in nature by the arrangement of sunflower seeds within the sunflower itself and the spiral of a nautilus shell, and can be viewed in the formation of galaxies, as well as seen as part of the spiral of life. The Fibonacci sequence is associated with divine growth and the spiral of life. The Fibonacci sequence is determined by numbers where the previous one and the number itself add up to the next Fibonacci number. The starting number for this is obviously going to be 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. 13 plus 8 is 21. Each number in the Fibonacci sequence can be used to plot out a spiral, and this is a very good meditation tool and will help gain deeper understanding of sacred geometry concepts and the Fibonacci sequence of numbers itself. Start at a central point on a piece of paper, and that will be your 0 point. Move out in a slow, gentle curve to the first point, and that'll be your next dot on the line. Connect that first dot to the second, then move out a little bit further on that gentle 1 to 1.68 ratio, and that will be your second point, and so on until you decide you are done with it. The Fibonacci sequence has been used as inspiration for various artworks throughout history and inspired the album by the prog rock band with a lot of occult interest and occult ties, Tool, on their album Lateralis. In fact, they have wrote a song on that album using the Fibonacci sequencing. It's a very interesting album to listen to, and a lot of the concepts throughout that album tie back into sacred geometry. Fibonacci and sacred geometry are heavily associated with the flower of life. The flower of life are circles arranged in a connecting pattern in a concentric way across a flattened surface. The 7 inner rings of the flower, represent the process of divine creation and are called the seed of life. Inside the flower of life, you will be able to find the Platonic Solids, as well as the Kabbalistic tree of life, among other things. A lot of the ancient European cathedrals were built to principles of sacred geometry and used them in clever ways that enabled them to convey sound across massive spaces, contain energy raised during services, and to have a general light energy within the building. I've never really heard of somebody going to a Gothic cathedral built between 1100 and 1700 and said the energy felt dingy and stale, not moving and no life in it, not some type of a holy energy. So, using the concepts of proportion and sacred geometry, if we were to create temples and spaces, we could utilize those concepts to help us build places that contained all the energy raised within our rituals and acts, as well as be a comfortable space for us to gather with our friends and family, our coven mates, and just do our work with our gods. This brings me to the end of my quick overview of the concepts of sacred geometry. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.